So hello, Debbie Ford.
Hello.
I put
So
my
excited to be here.
yeah, and I put my fabulous shadow background, especially for this interview.
I know, I'm so inspired. I'm like, I want that shadow background.
Oh, we're gonna discuss the shadow because you have actually joined forces with Marianne Williamson, and Deepak Chopra to put together this new book, The Shadow Effect. So we want to hear all about it from you. It's such a delight to have you. So tell us, what is this shadow that you're referring to in this book?
Well, the shadow is all the parts of ourselves that we hide or we deny or suppress. The great Swiss psychologist Carl Jung said the shadow is the person that we'd rather not be. And so it can be our worst nightmare, but it can also be all the parts of ourselves that we've given up. Our brilliance, our creativity, our power, our voice, our uniqueness, our successful self even. And so it's something that's innate to human beings. If you're a human, you have a shadow.
Yeah.
And, if you're willing to explore it instead of hate it or try to get rid of it or try to transcend it or eat over it or drink over it or spend over it, you can actually reinvent yourself in a way you never thought possible.
So we do all have this dark side?
Oh, yes, we do all have one.
Because
It's
a lot
how
of us
we,
try to push it away. I mean, especially with all the positivity and everything that is so, great out there, we've heard that it's all about that, but you're saying really we have to really look at this other part of ourselves.
well, and you bring up something really, really important because most people think, oh, I've got to just pretend it's not there. I need the light, more light. But if we were really shining that light, we would be shining it on the darkness. So it isn't dark anymore. We would be finding why we should love it or how it has supported us or something good about it. If we were really standing in the light, there wouldn't be any darkness because we would know that the shadow is a healthy human part of us that's coming to support us in our evolution.
So what's the way to look at it then? How can we face it? Where do we start from?
Oh, well, I think the first thing is to look where you're struggling. The places in your life where you don't have everything you want, or where you've tried to be different than you are, but you keep showing up the same way, or you keep having the same issues. Then we know that there's a shadow lurking. There's probably some light shadows there, like you need more of yourself, or you need to embrace more of your courage or your strength or your worthiness or your lovability, right? Those are the light, but then also the shadows lurk. And the shadow is there so that we can learn how to love. So if we find that quality that we've denied or we don't like, just think about it like this. Anything that we judge is our shadow.
Wow.
And so we judge it in other people, but it's only because we're really judging that part of ourselves. We would hate that if we knew that that was the truth about ourselves. So if we think of it that way, we can start to say, how could I be kind to this part? Maybe my unworthy self or my not good enough self or my stupid self. These parts, I mean, we're human. In the book, Deepak talks a lot about the dualistic nature of being a human. We are the saint and the sinner, the divine and the diabolical, the light and the dark. And that humans, we wouldn't know light if we didn't know darkness. We wouldn't know kindness if we never experienced meanness. We wouldn't know what it was to be selfless if we didn't embrace our selfish self. And so that's what we're doing here. We're bringing the dualistic nature and learning how to really love. Because it's easy to love yourself when you feel good and everybody's doing what you want and you have enough money and you look good and everything's going your way. But how do you love yourself when you've been hurt or you've been betrayed or you failed at something? And that is real love. And that's what the shadow effect teaches us to do.
But those moments, often Debbie pops in an instant when we're really like, there's those triggers, and all of a sudden we would overeat or overspend. It's like uncontrollable. We're in this loop of such a, we're out of control. So what is the trick? Is there a little trick? Or is there really deep, long work, hours and hours of torture in our heads to find what's going on?
I think that the torture is accepting that you're dualistic, that you're human and divine. That's the torture. Once we understand it, then the trick is, my favorite shadow trick to find your shadow is to look at what you love most about yourself. Do you want to do it with me?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So tell me the quality that you love most about yourself.
I love connecting with people, just really being comfortable while connecting on a deep level with people and allowing them to be fully themselves and express themselves.
Okay, so we would say that's kind of a behavior, something you do. But what kind of person would love to connect with other people and love to have people be authentically who they are? What would be the quality of that person? Would it be somebody heart-centered, somebody loving, somebody generous? What do you think the quality would be?
Generous, yeah.
Yeah, you like generous?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So then you see all the ways that you're generous. You're generous with your time, with spreading knowledge, spreading love, connecting people, right? You see that. You love that.
Yeah.
So now I would say to you, what would be, I know you're like, what would be the negative opposite of generous, of a generous person?
Rigid or not flexible or...
I think rigid would be your word because it's the first word out. So you probably don't like rigid people.
No.
No, right? That's your shadow.
Okay.
That's your shadow, the rigidity. And did you have a parent that was rigid? Or maybe
I really don't like the unrespectfulness of some people in some regards. Yeah, I don't like that.
You don't like that?
Yeah.
Great. But I would say, what could be the gift now? We found the shadow, right? The shadow is rigid. Because you can't be rigid, you become this very caring, loving, generous human being, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what people would say about you. Mm-hmm. But the rigidness probably is what birthed the person you are today.
Yeah.
Now the problem, can you see me or did you lose? Did I lose?
Yeah,
you?
I can see you, yeah.
Oh, good, because I couldn't see you. And that's what the shadow does, it blinds you. So we would say, what is the gift of being rigid? How could you be kind? Let me ask you this question. Where in your life would it be good for you to be a little more rigid?
In saying no sometimes. Just
Exactly. And saying, if you were more rigid, you would be able to say no more. Yeah. If you were able to say no more, you'd have more what?
Would have just more time to fully explore, other things that are even more meaningful.
Right? You would be open, you'd have time, you'd allow something else. You'd be generous with yourself, really.
Yeah.
Right? Because you allow yourself to have more time and be able to explore more. See, that would be the gift of you embracing your rigid self. We think, I don't like that quality, normally because we saw that quality. Maybe it was a selfish part of a parent or a sister or brother or something that we saw in our culture. And then all of a sudden we say, I'm not going to be that. We wrap ourselves up in the opposite of the shadow. But then what we lose is all of what that part of us is supposed to give to us. Mm-hmm. So if you tried this experiment for 21 days and then we got back together, like you really got up in the morning and you said, how can I love my rigid self? What boundaries would I put in place if I was a little more rigid? What would I do for myself? I bet you that something radical would alter in your outer world. because the outer world is a reflection of our inner world, right? Our behaviors are consistent with the shadows that we've hidden away. Mm-hmm. And so if we know that we're both rigid and flexible, right? We're both, self-absorbed and selfless. And we say, wow, what would be the gift of this quality? I would suggest, and I've done this with hundreds of thousands of people, so I know it's true, that you will birth a new unimaginable future, and it will come from you loving something that you've judged.
So this is what you call by, when you say that we unlock our lights then.
Yes, you illuminate, we're bringing light to this rigid part of you, right? To a part of ourselves that we've made wrong or judged. And more than likely, you see it in the other people in the outer world, because when we have a shadow, we energetically draw forth to us the exact thing, because the universe is always trying to show us. And so since we can't see ourselves, we only can see ourselves in the outer world, then we draw that to us. And so if you allow that part, right, when we embrace, not accept the shadow, because that is really, to me, the second part of the process. The first part is uncovering what is your shadow. The second part is owning up to it, saying, well, I probably am rigid somewhere anyway, because you are rigid about being generous probably, right? You just have to say yes. That's a rigidness, just in the opposite way. And so the third part is, how could this serve me, and how could I love and accept and illuminate this? And that's why the subtitle is Illuminating the True Self, because we as humans have made so much of ourselves wrong.
Clearly. And so the shadow and the soul is intimately linked then.
Completely linked. I mean, some of these characteristics, Deepak Chopra would say, we come into to work out some of our karma, to work out these things from our past so that we can grow, that we can evolve, so that we can step into a future that's unimaginable. See, it's interesting, and I write a lot about that in this book, because I've written many on the shadow. But in the shadow effect, I write about how we continue to become robotic and more robotic as the years go by. Naturally, we become rigid in our beliefs and what we eat and where we go, who we hang out with. And so unless we're going to go into the shadow and reclaim and embrace these parts of ourselves that we've rejected out of shame, out of fear, out of guilt, out of just not believing. One day we're little, we're singing loud, we're happy, and a parent can all of a sudden say, you know what, you're too loud, be quiet, settle down. And all of a sudden we take our fully self-expressed self and we hide it away. And then we wonder the rest of our lives, why can't I live in full self-expression? So when we go into the shadow, we find a treasure chest, amazing parts of ourselves that will give us an unimaginable future.
Would you say that the planet also has its shadow, and it's about time for us to look at that also?
Oh, yes. And I think the shadow is beating us up right now. Right?
That's how it feels.
The shadow of greed. Of course, the French might project it on the United States, on the Americans, and the British will project on the French. And, we go around and round projecting our shadows because we don't take responsibility. And the reason why we still have starvation and people without water and abuse and all the things that are going on and war is because we won't own up to who we are, and we're always projecting. Anything we don't embrace and love in ourselves becomes our shadow. And so, we're all being hit by the global shadows. Maybe it's our irresponsibility. We want other people to be responsible, to run our governments, to take care of us. And so we're not responsible and we're not involved. And then we're angry when our governments or the politicians do something stupid. But really, most of us are sitting back just from the sidelines saying, you do it.
Mm. So what is our role here? What can we do about that? Knowing this shadow, is it us personally taking the responsibility?
That's where it starts. Like, I'm going to, if indeed I am a microcosm of the macrocosm, meaning I'm a piece of the whole, and that I'm not in the world, but that the whole world is within me, then my job is to begin by loving that world within me, by loving all that I am, by embracing, that I have an angry self and a mean self and a vindictive self and a selfish self. And I also have a loving self and a peaceful self and a generous self and abundant self. When we start to take responsibility for our parts of ourselves, we'll start to be different kinds of humans in the world, because we won't be throwing these shadows onto other people. And we'll be training our children not, don't be this, don't be that, don't be mean, don't be angry, don't be. All those don't be's makes one believe I'm not okay. I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. Where did we get that? And then we hide those parts in the shadow, and we can't deliver our authentic gifts to the world. We can't be our greatest self, because if indeed, we show some part of ourselves that's imperfect, it would deem us unacceptable and unloved, and that we don't belong.
So does that have something to do with? Does that have something to do with the dark night of the soul?
Well, when we go through the dark night of the soul, we usually wrestle with our shadows. And we learn to accept and love and embrace and make peace with parts of ourselves that we've hated. So most of us will go through this dark night of the soul in one way or the other, but it's not there to beat us up. It's not there to hurt us. It's there to help us grow.
It's quite scary, though.
It is scary, but a lot of people are calling the shadow effect the book of human knowledge. Because if you understand, you can, I'd say triple time go through it. Most people, it's long and slow and suffering. And the other is understanding where you're going. Humans are suffering because we're resisting where we're going, because we don't understand where we're going. And so if we understand the shadow and we are proactive in our lives, then life changes. Things open up to us. We don't have to wait to get clobbered over the head by some horrible incident or a betrayal or a death or, losing our job and not having enough money. We can proactively say, what's in my shadow that could serve me today? How could I open my heart and be more compassionate and loving and heartful to these parts of myself? Because it's the incidents that happen to us that move us into the dark night aren't the problem. The problem is what we make it mean about ourselves.
Right.
And in that meaning, we start to beat ourselves up. We take out that internal bat and we just whack ourselves. And then, it's over and over and over. And that beating ourselves up just prolongs the process. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, we are on this earth to learn to love, not just the goodness, but all of who we are. And in that, then we will spread love to all those and have compassion to those that are, doing things that we think we would never dare do.
Tell us, how was it to collaborate with Deepak Chopra and Marianne Williamson? Did you all play a part? Apparently there's one chapter that you each worked on, because you have very different qualities, I would say, about all of you three. So that makes it quite an interesting book, doesn't it, in collaboration?
Yeah, I think it's an amazing, people will love it. And because we come at the shadow from 3 different places, and Deepak really does the psychological prescriptive part of it, you know, from his background and, you know, a very deep spiritual process. I go through the emotional part, and that's really my work. And how do we do the work, and how do we relate all this shadow stuff to our own lives? And then Marianne really does a beautiful, holy, spiritual part about bringing in the love and understanding that true, pure love will cast out the darkness. I think what we're thinking of, the problem with this is that people think, oh, the love, I could just say, you know, love the goodness. But to cast out the darkness, we must love and understand that as well.
And love is a superpower, isn't it? It can transform everything.
It can transform everything in every moment. And when we understand being human, human is to learn how to love. And but we can't cut half of ourselves. And so if people today found some quality they've been wrestling with and said, okay, I know there's something good in it, and I'm going to work to find what's good, and how could I open my heart, and how could I understand that my lazy self might be trying to get me to rest and may save me from having a heart attack, and my greedy self might have me put some money away for the future or hard times, and my selfish self may be there to help me set some boundaries. And when we start to understand, my mean self might have put a boundary up for somebody who's violating us, and that they're not bad qualities, that truly Spirit didn't make any spare parts. You know, they're all important.
And I heard that you were, Oprah Winfrey was majorly helping you also spread this across the globe.
Yes, and if people go to Oprah.com at any time, it will always be on the site. Right now we're doing a live course. So if people read the book and then do the course, they just go to Oprah.com and go to the Spirit section, and the shadow effect is all over it.
Really,
and then go
really nice.
The shadoweffect.com. We have different things in the back of the book. There's an amazing quiz. I think that quiz in and of itself will blow people's minds.
That's on the Shadow Effect website.
Yeah, it's on the book.
On the book. Okay. And do you have a last little thing that we might have forgotten to talk about, or a last message that is important for you to get out right now?
Thank you for asking. You know, I think that just that you and all of us and everybody watching and listening, we have a right to love who we are. We have a right to be our true, authentic self, you know, beyond our secrets, beyond our pain, beyond our past. And shadow work is the work of the heart warrior. It promises and to give you a life that was, like mine, unimaginable to me.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you so much for having me.